for main engine start. 7, 6.
From space-age technology to baby powder, and from water filtration systems to precious metals and geothermal electric power generation facilities. This vast desert land encompasses some 200,000 square miles, which includes the states of California, Oregon, Nevada, and Utah, and provides an immense variety of resources to mankind. We will take a look at how to locate, unearth, and utilize these resources as we begin our journey into the fascinating discovery of the Great Basin and what lies beneath. The Great Basin, with its majestic mountains and flat, desolate valleys and beautiful sunsets, was created in ancient times from several massive lakes that through time and geological changes has left us valuable resources and remnants of their past. The Great Basin is an endorheic basin with no outlet for water to flow. Due to the nature of this closed basin and high solar evaporation, salts and minerals are highly concentrated. These salts and minerals sometimes provide the basin with what is called salt flats. All rain, snow, or any other precipitation that falls into the basin can only leave through seepage or evaporation. These types of basin are usually found in the hot, high, dry desert.
Well, when you can talk about desert, it generally means a low rainfall area. Therefore, this limits the normal cropping that we would see in other areas of the country.
Today, the remnants of these mammoth bodies of water lie in smaller lakes that have contributed extensively to the economy by way of helping and supporting industries within the Great Basin region. Some industries that are located within these regions are of the type that the product that they manufacture or engineer is very hazardous and kept reasonably out of view from the general public's eye.
There are people that live out here. There's ranching and agriculture. There's mining. There's oil down there in the ground.
The first step in locating most of the minerals that lie beneath in the Great Basin is the process of exploration.
As part of defining the resource and where you need to mine and the quality of the material that you're mining, you certainly need to have geologists help define the material that you're going to mine.
A team of geologists ranging from engineering to geophysics engage in performing and supervising geologic and geophysical field survey work, which involves various types of analysis, including rock cores, soil and aggregate samples, data interpretation, and the preparation of geologic reports of findings. With most of the data compiled by our geologists, we will begin by informing the drilling contractor of the location, depths, and samples that we want taken. Sounds easy. So let's go take a look at a drilling rig. Here we find a small drilling rig working in the southwestern region of the Great Basin near Unionville, Nevada. There are many parts to a drilling rig, as we see here, starting with the spinner assembly that spins the drill shaft, the collar that connects the joints together, the pipe that varies in length and accommodates the drilling fluid, the weight that adds pressure to the bit, and the bit itself that grinds into the earth with the aid of the liquefied drilling medium. Drilling mud, also called drilling fluid, is a medium used in the operations to drill boreholes into the earth. Water-based drilling mud consists of bentonite clay with additives such as barium sulfate, calcium carbonate, and hematite. Various thickeners are used to influence the viscosity of the mud. The mud is used to cool and clean the drill bit and to carry the material to the surface for collection. This is done by shooting high-pressure mud through the feed hose down the drill pipe, which forces the fluid and the material engulfing the drill head to the surface, where it is discharged out through the separator and into the shale shaker. Shale shakers come in a variety of sizes, shapes, and forms. Most have 2 chambers, both of which are circulating and designed to take a specified size of the sample material and set it aside for collection. Here, at the bottom of the chamber, is where the samples are being pulled from. Selected quantities of the core material are gathered and collected in 5-gallon buckets. Smaller samples are then taken and sent to laboratories where it is analyzed for the specific materials that they are mining for. Depending on the depth and type of soil, drilling will require sometimes days to weeks before the job is done. Now we know a little about how to find our rich deposits. Let's see what resources lie beneath in the Great Basin. Our first resource we're going to take a look at is water, essential and necessary.
Water is limited amount, and therefore it's recycled.
Today, dams provide most of the storage needs, but droughts indicate it's never enough.
We have to be more efficient in the use of it. Well, first of all, for domestic purposes, water is the most needed nutrient for our human body. Where water flows, food grows. Particularly in agriculture, we're seeing multiple uses of the water before it either evaporates into the air or percolates into the ground. And then for the food that's being produced for it, if it's for generating income from the farmer's standpoint, they have to find the crops that will be most efficient in that use and have a marketable value to it.
Besides being a necessary need for agricultural use, water has many uses in the industrial desert world, one of which is a highly efficient growing technology, geothermal energy. Cool waters from lakes and rivers are not the only source of water in the Great Basin. In some areas just inches from the surface, boiling hot water emerges, providing a source of heating and energy generation. Today, the geothermal energy fields are limited and scattered throughout these regions. A leader in the technology of geothermal energy is a company called Ormat. Ormat uses their patented Ormat energy converters that come in various versions, shapes, and sizes. The Ormat energy converter operation follows the organic Rankine cycle. An organic Rankine cycle is a thermodynamic process where heat is added to a fluid at a constant pressure. The fluid is vaporized, then expanded in a vapor turbine, which drives the generator, producing electricity. The spent vapor flows to a condenser where it is condensed to a liquid and recycled back into the ground. In a conventional steam plant, the fluid is water and steam. In the organic Rankine cycle, an organic fluid is used. As we look around, we can see that water plays an important part in our everyday lives and has become more and more limited in its supply.
Opals. So how were opals created from this vast, isolated, mountainous land here in Virgin Valley? The hills around here were covered by a petrified forest at one time, and a volcanic eruption took place and laid the forest down, most of which fell into the massive La Hontan Lake. The volcanic ash began to fall and sink to cover the petrified wood. As more of the wood rotted, the ash filled in the voids, and the water percolating up through the silica begins the process of creating opals. Welcome to the Royal Peacock Opal Mine in the heart of Virgin Valley, where time and volcanic activity plays an important role in the process of creating opals. So tell me some history about the land here in Virgin Valley.
Well, my father-in-law bought the mine in 1941, and he was raised cattle and horses here. He didn't do any mining. He bought it for my mother-in-law, and she'd go up and scratch around and dig a little bit. And then in 1968, my son opened it up.
The mine is what you call a fee dig mine, where you pay a fee and are then allowed to dig in a specified area for opals. There seems to be two kinds of opals, a common and a precious opal. So tell me, Walter, what's the difference between them?
Well, there's a common opal, which doesn't have any play of color. A precious opal has a play of color. And it's the way the spheres are lined up inside the opal that makes the colors, like a prism.
When did your family start this enterprise?
My granddad worked in here as a cow boss for Miller and Lux. And my grandmother, she liked the opals in here, so he bought the opal claims from a guy that had them in here. And he was in here in 1906, and they bought the opal claims in the 40s.
So let's stop and ask one of these miners, is there any truth to beginner's luck?
Anybody can poke into one at any time. It could be the best rockhound miner, with all the equipment, or it could be somebody just poking in with a screwdriver and having some beginner's luck, Beginner's luck works really good here.
You talk about your grandmother liking the opals. How did they find these opals? Were they just laying all over the ground?
This was you know, there were cattle in here, so an old cowboy, you know, stumbled on to one on the surface because they, you know, when they first started in here, they were on the surface.
How likely is it for a person to leave here with a prized gem?
Except the kid that was out here with me last week filled a whole bucket full of these.
That looks like a very fine specimen.
Pretty much you have every color of the rainbow, and then I think there's some made up in between.
This looks like a very laborious job. I hope you find something of value for your efforts.
Almost back to work.
Tell me, Walter, about the largest cut stone found here on your ranch.
And the Royal Peacock Opal, it's the largest cut stone that has ever been found in Virgin Valley, you know, that was actually cut. And it's 160 carats approximately, you know, so about half the size of an egg. And originally when they found it, it was a 3.5 pound log. And they cut it into the peacock, which was 160 carat, and then they cut 2 little peacock opals that were like 40 or 50 carats apiece.
What did they get for it?
When the company sold that opal, they sold it for $45,000.
So what was the largest opal found in the valley?
Probably the biggest straight opal we've ever found is probably about 20 pounds.
I found that most of the miners were very happy with their finds, even though most only had small size rocks, no bigger than, say, an egg. Is there a reason why size matters in opals?
Usually the big ones don't have the color that the smaller ones have.
I guess you could make some very fine jewelry out of the smaller opals.
You could. I've seen pretty little ones. For the most part, they're just collector pieces.
Tell me something about the opals that are back in the Smithsonian.
Well, there's several back there. Yeah, there's I think the Roebling opal, which came from Rainbow Ridge, is back there, and it was, you know, put back there probably 40, 50 years ago. But there's, you know, several black opals that are back there in the Smithsonian.
Have you done any commercial mining here?
And there's been, you know, commercial outfits that have tried to come in, and you know, this Kelly in the 60s, you know, he had like a 25, 30-man crew. And they come in and mined them, and everything went into one pot, and then he took them around and tried to sell them.
Mining the tailings, can this kind of mining be profitable?
So the tailings are, you know, pretty decent. We have a machine that we've run tailings before and, you know, did pretty well with it.
We can add another resource found in the Great Basin to our list. Let's continue our travels and look deeper into the ground for our next valuable resource.
Diatomaceous earth is a single-cell algae that lived in some freshwater lake some 9 million years ago. Their source of water was cut off to these freshwater lakes. Subsequent tectonic movement, the diatomite was covered by volcanic ash as some of the gray material over some stream gravel, over some erosional material that subsequently covered it and preserved it. When they die, their skeletal remains is highly siliceous, and there's about 1.1 million of these diatoms per square inch. These are microscopic organisms. First thing you do is you drill and you see what is the depth of the overburden to the diatomite, to the ore.
The depth of the overburden can vary from 60 to 180 feet. Here we see 3 distinct geological periods of the ore that has dried up. As you notice, there is one layer of diatomite. Below that is a thin layer of volcanic ash from a specific event in time, such as an erupting volcano. Beneath the first level of volcanic ash lies another layer of diatomaceous earth, preceded in time by a narrow band of waste material, with another deposit of diatomite under the waste. How much does diatomaceous earth weigh in comparison to other materials?
Gravel weighs approximately 2,400 pounds, something like that. Our material, a yard, would be a third of that. Pick up any of these chunks you think is going to weigh a couple hundred pounds, and you're going to end up finding out this weighs about 25, 30 pounds. This weighs approximately, I would say, about 18 pounds.
Tell me, Mac, when's the best time for mining?
Better to mine in the summertime for solar drying, because it's quite an expensive thing to dry the material. It has to be zero moisture when it goes through the kiln there for the processing. So the more air drying they do, the less natural gas they have to use at the plant. It's real critical to emphasize our selectivity.
What's the next part of the process?
Then you sample the diatomite based on the uniformity. You take the sample to our analytical lab, and we try to duplicate the process which you would go through the plant. You classify it, get the contaminants such as dirt, sand out of it, then the end product is mixed with soda ash and it's calcined at approximately 1600 degrees to duplicate what the material would do. Then the finished product would again be put through another air separation process.
The specific requirements of the customer dictates the level and variety of processes before the final product is delivered to the client's facility. What happens to the holes in the ground?
As a part of a continuous mining plant, all the holes would be backfilled as we move out, saving topsoil and replanting it with a native grass and resloping all the waste dump area, reclaiming it to make sure we restore it to the original condition there. Its use was found in Germany over 100 years ago. This material is essentially used for filtration material in breweries, edible industries, as an additive to pharmaceutical purposes, paint industries like the abrasive for toothpaste, edible oil, corn syrup, wine, inert chemical. It's used as a filler, in the filtration material.
Which brings us to our next valuable resource, gypsum. Gypsum is commonly found where thick and extensive evaporation beds, which are associated with a sedimentary rock, and are generally deposited in lake beds, seawater, and hot springs from volcanic vapors and sulfuric solutions. In veins, it is formed by hydration to near surface exposure, and is often associated with minerals like halite and sulfur. Gypsum is most commonly used in drywall. North America is the largest user of gypsum board, using some 40 billion square feet each year, with the average home using 7 metric tons of gypsum. Let's take a look inside at how U.S. Gypsum, one of the leading manufacturers of drywall and sheetrock, processes its gypsum into a marketable product. The specially treated paper comes in large rolls and is delivered to the manufacturing facility. The rolls of paper, one of which is called face paper, is made from manila hemp. The second, called newsline, or back paper, is made from recycled matter and wood pulp. Here the two types of paper are fed through a pair of rollers. The paper is heated on both edges and is then run through what is called the edge creaser. Here a crease is indented on the outer edge of the paper. Wallboard slurry mixtures are made up of gypsum and various other ingredients that the customer might request. Additives such as fire retardants, moisture control agents, and germicides, just to mention a few of the possible combinations. The slurry mixture is spread evenly along the paper until it reaches the compressor and roller, which compacts the gypsum core to the proper thickness, thereby creating and forming the board. The board, which is inverted at this point, with the back or newsline paper facing up, goes through the forming station, which is further aiding in the creation of the width, depth, and edge type that the customer has requested. The face paper is wrapped snugly around each edge and is sealed to the back paper using an edge tape that holds the form as the slurry mixture begins to dry. The gypsum board then continues along the assembly line, which can range anywhere from 300 to 800 feet or more in length. The next step on the assembly line is to have the barcode and time stamped on the backside of what will become an individual sheet of gypsum board. At this point, the plastic core has set sufficiently for a knife to slice the continuous strip into specific panel sizes, generally ranging from 48 to 54 inches wide and from 8 to 12 feet long. The boards then arrive at the inspection area, where several inspectors can be found monitoring and ensuring the customer's requirements. After completing the knife inspection area, the panels are loaded into the gas-fired ovens, which can be as long as 600 feet or more. The ovens are maintained at a constant temperature for a predetermined amount of time. Each panel is inspected for moisture content, as the humidity and temperatures were carefully controlled in the dryers. As the gypsum board moves through the facility, the panels are inverted by gentle, precise machine action to ensure that the product is not chipped or damaged. The panels come to the end cut saw, which cuts a perfectly straight edge along the end of the board, and then they are paired together and protected by tape that is applied at each end of the sheetrock panels. The paired bundles are then stacked by machine and ready to be loaded onto the distribution floor. The product distribution point is where the boards are either taken for a supplemental coating on the backside or to another warehouse. If your product requires foiling, the boards are gently loaded onto another set of rollers where they will begin the foiling process. Here, the foil is placed on the backside of the boards as a customer requirement. The type of metal foils that are applied do vary from aluminum to gold, copper, and silver. Here, the forklift driver loads another shipment of sheetrock on its way to a happy customer. When you're driving through your city and you look around and see new construction going on, just remember the inner walls of most of those buildings will be made with wallboard, made from gypsum. The time of creation till present day, this well-known metal has thought to be humanity's most plentiful, low-cost, and beneficial backbone for the world's high-technology industries. With the expanding world populations and increasingly high appetites for energy and technology, is this metal becoming rare?
Well, the stuff that the people in the 1870s and 1880s at this property thought were mined out, we're going right down through those old underground workings and remining it.
Today, copper is as valuable as silver. As reported in the media, one can see the rising amount of theft of copper wire in the societies we live in. Today's mining operation involves the movement of tons of dirt and rock to be crushed, and includes separating the rich ore soil from the plain ordinary dirt. An environmental concern in the mining industry is recycling the dirt where it is used to backfill old mining pits.
We manage things from a waste perspective, groundwater, air, ensuring that we have monies for reclamation purposes.
Meeting today's needs for copper concentrated ores is a demanding responsibility for the Great Basin mining industry.
Certainly the mining industry is very highly regulated.
Businesses like the Robinson Mining Company are becoming leaders in the use of high technologies and work closely with on-site inspectors, constantly monitoring the environmental issues facing miners. Pure copper is rarely found in nature, but is combined with other chemicals in the form of copper ores such as sulfides, oxides, and sulfates. The color of copper sulfates and sulfides varies from orange and reds to greens and some blues. Many ores also contain significant quantities of gold, silver, nickel, and other valuable metals, as well as large quantities of commercially useless material. Most sulfide ores are taken from huge open-pit mines by drilling and blasting. Let's follow our guide and see the steps necessary to take this precious metal out of the ground.
Now, underneath that crushed ore stockpile, we have a tunnel. And in that tunnel, there's 5 feeders underneath it. And so we operate feeders from underneath that stockpile that load a conveyor belt that goes from the tunnel up into the mill building.
So let's go mining. I could see that this mining operation is by no means small. Look at the size of the shovel they are using to load the raw material. What's that small dozer doing?
So there you've got a rubber tire dozer again cleaning the floor for the trucks to back in.
That little dozer does a pretty good job of keeping the area clear of tire puncturing rocks.
And you've got a BE 495 shovel.
Sure enough, looks like he's got a big rock stuck in his bucket. Well, we'll let them deal with it. Let's move on to the next stop and find out what they do with this ore-rich soil.
So this is the mouth of our primary crusher. And it's about a 7-story tall structure from top to bottom. And we have several ways of feeding it. We can feed it with a front end loader out of the ore stockpiles. And we can back in, of course, and dump trucks. The way this crusher works, this design of crusher, it's a rather large cone-shaped opening. And then across the top it's got what we call a spider, but it's essentially just a brace that goes from side to side. And then underneath it has got a reverse cone that moves in a gyratory manner. And so it works a little bit like a mortar and pestle does. And so what happens is as that cone down below moves, it'll open up and rocks will move down, and then as it comes around, it'll close and it'll crush it.
The material moves underground by way of the 5 feeder lines into the mill building. The mill building contains the necessary machinery and logistical support units to finalize the processes necessary in removing the impurities from the ore. How do you control all this at one time?
It is controlled basically from here. So what we've got is we've got a series of sensors, level sensors, speed sensors, temperature sensors, on-stream chemical analyzers that all report to this series of screens here. And so this guy right here can stop and start pumps, cyclones, mills, crushers, and everything from here, and he can monitor what's going on. The top deck of screens give him the chemical performance, metallurgical performance of the thing, and the bottom set of screens gives him the physical status reports of the plant.
Let's step outside and take a look at some of the machinery.
That conveyor belt that I showed you that was coming from underneath the stockpile is coming right there. And then it drops through a chute into the mouth of what we call a semi-autogenous grinding mill. So that looks very much like a cement mixer, except it's 32 feet in diameter and 20 feet deep across the barrel. And it's got 2 10,000 horsepower motors that drive it. And essentially what it does is it takes that material that's minus 8 inch and it grinds it down to minus 5/8 inch. And the way the cyclone works, this material gets pumped in here, goes around and around. The light stuff goes out the top and the heavy stuff goes out the bottom. So we call this a cyclone cluster. The fine material goes to flotation through those pipes. The heavy stuff goes into the ball mills. These are each driven by a 7,000 horsepower engine, electric motor.
So when it leaves the cyclones, where does it go?
Comes from the grinding side, is delivered through this pair of pipes here to a distribution box. From there it's split into 2 streams and goes down into our rougher flotation, which is right here below it. And then we'll come down and take a look how the flotation works. This is where the various reagents are added. So here's the hand washing. All of that ground up rock with the reagents is introduced into these 2 banks of cells. Then you bubble it up with the reagents, and what floats is chalcopyrite. That's what gives it the brassy color. And so that's where we recover our copper, gold, silver, and molybdenum is right here. And so these 2 banks of cells are taking roughly 22,000 tons an hour and floating copper out of it. That's essentially the rinsing off of selective parts of your dirt. Now the underflow from here is what we call tailing, and that's got the barren rock in it with the copper extracted. We send it over to 2 big thickeners that I'll drive you by, and that's where we try to get as much water out of it as we can before we pump the tailing down to the tailings dam. That part of the process was rougher flotation. We have 2 more steps of flotation. These are tower cells, and what they do is they're our cleaner flotation. They polish off the product to make it into as high a grade as possible. And then this set of cells that we're standing on is called scavenger cells. And they're smaller, but they're after the finer particles. So when you look down inside here, you can see it's behaving the same, but the bubbles are smaller and it's collecting finer particles. Now the concentrate, when we finish polishing that concentrate, we send it out to a couple of concentrate thickeners, which are large round ponds outside here, and we get water out of them. That thickened concentrate we pump into this tank right here, and from there we pump it up into a pair of filters. And those filters work like a giant filter press, where it loads it, opens it up, and it's opening up right now. And then we'll dump the dried copper concentrate out of it onto a conveyor belt now, and then we'll load it up with fresh wet material and then squeeze it to get the water out.
I keep hearing about molybdenum. What is that?
Molybdenum showing up in our ore, we have a molybdenum extraction circuit. The molybdenum will show up in the copper concentrate, and we'll store it in a separate tank, and then we'll turn on the molybdenum flotation circuit and we'll extract the molybdenum out of the copper. So it's got a series of rougher, cleaner, and scavenger flotation cells, but just on a much smaller scale, because it's not treating 22,000 tons an hour, it's treating 800 tons a day. That's why it fits in the corner over here. And we store these up, assay them, and when we've got about 40 tons worth, then we call in a truck and have it shipped off. And molybdenum is used for hardening steel, and we can sell this on the world market. It's currently being consumed at a plant in south of Tucson, Arizona. Looks kind of steely gray, and this runs about 40 to 50% molybdenum in it. Molybdenum is used to harden steel as well as for a lubricant. So your Mobil 1 synthetic oils is a high molybdenum content lubricant. So those are the kinds of applications that molybdenum is used for.
So where do these materials go from here?
We currently ship by truck to Wendover, Nevada, our concentrate. And from there it's shipped by rail to the port of Vancouver, Washington. And then from there it's sold by ships to the ultimate consumer.
Copper is also fused with other metals to provide us with bronze, brass, and important metals that are in our everyday lives.
Gold, 24 karat gold is pure gold. When you talk about 14 karat, 10 carats of that is copper, and 14 carats is gold.
Electric cars, motors, and computers are just a few of the items that we rely on every day.
We talk about hybrid cars with electric motors in them and battery-powered cars. They're going to contain, frankly, a lot more copper in them than the current cars.
Copper wire and tubing are some of the most common products that are made from copper. Among its industrial use, copper is used in medicine, chemistry, automotive, and electronics, with copper wire being used abundantly to carry the world's electricity.